Folks, we're going to start in about 5 minutes.
That one's good.
Oh, we're getting a crowd. I was worried we just started getting some of that.
Well, there's good. Yeah, good. Is that the newspaper?
Yeah.
Good.
You don't need to ask you that. I can look 3 minutes.
I was just making sure the whole thing wouldn't topple when I pulled it out.
And Ron, we did say there's not a meet and greet in here, but it's okay
Out
in the
there,
cafeteria
yeah.
after we're all
But
done?
they have to be out by 9 o'clock.
Out by 9 o'clock. We'll be done by 8:30. That would
Yeah,
give
yeah.
them half an hour to.
Hi, Rob.
At least they give us fairly comfortable seats, huh?
Yeah.
I don't know if John Schultz is coming in. He said he might.
Yeah.
If he comes, I'm gonna have him come up here.
No, we're starting. If he's here, he just
Too
sits
late
in the
now.
audience.
What?
We have a 2-minute warning.
'Each team has 3 timeouts to take the board.
We're not going to go to commercial break, no.
You have your questions ready.
I do.
Okay.
Tell me, I told Bill Paczynski earlier, I was talking about the Wisconsin American Legion Foundation on the way home. I totally screwed that.
Yeah.
You bet.
Now let's not worry about it now. Let's get this done. Oh, I asked him for one more
It's
chair.
not behind. Just move it.
You know what? Ron, let me get one more chair. Do we need one more chair?
No. We do not unless John would show up.
Yeah, he's not. He's going to sit in the audience.
Yeah, no. I don't have to sit behind. Yeah, one wrap and
One wrap. And it'll be good. Half a minute. A quick test. Do I need the microphone? Yes. Okay, I'll use the microphone. Ready to go?
is it 7 o'clock?
Don't know.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Good evening, Williams Bay. To the Geneva Lakes VFW Post 2373 and the Ingalls-Koeppen American Legion Post 102's sponsorship of today's candidate forum. Please stand if you can, and all veterans face the flag, present arms. Order arms. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Be seated. Tonight's forum features District 31 State Assembly Rep. Tyler August and Democratic opponent Dr. John Perryman. We have two distinguished guests today. We have Ty Leto, who is the Wisconsin VFW State Commander. We also have our own Nate Bond, the Wisconsin American Legion State Commander. A special welcome to any of the students who are 18 or will be 18 before the next election. It is their first opportunity to participate in our democracy. Also, thanks to Superintendent Dr. William White for allowing us to use the auditorium tonight. Membership in the VFW is open to all veterans who have served honorably in what is commonly known as a combat or hostile fire zone. The American Legion welcomes all veterans who served honorably regardless of where or when they served. If you qualify, please consider joining one or both of our posts or a post near your home. We have membership forms at a table in the corner. The Geneva Lake VFW Post 2373 started in 1932 with 27 charter members led by Commander Walter Hansen. I have the honor and privilege to be the latest in a long line of successors to Walter. For the third year in a row, our Post 2373 has been designated as an All-American post in recognition of our service to vets and to the community at large. As we all know, this year we celebrate the 250th anniversary of the birth of our country. We have a Betsy Ross flag up here. Over that time, multitudes of men and women of the armed forces have fought and died to preserve our freedom and our rights. One of the most important of those rights is the right to vote. I believe we have a moral obligation to always exercise that right so that those who have given up their lives have not died in vain. Republicans and Democrats both have the same goal, that is to serve the interests of American citizens. They differ in how to achieve these goals. The candidates will explain their differences, and it is for you to determine which candidate most aligns with your positions. Before we start, I want to invite all of you to attend the Memorial Day Parade and Ceremony. Last year, we had over 1,000 people who attended, and we hope for more this year. Also, our major fundraiser, our 50/50 raffle tickets, will be available at the Farmers Market and at the park on Memorial Day. Nate Bond, who is also the adjutant for Post 2373, will now formally introduce the candidates. As it is often said, all politics are local. Nate?
Thank you. The biographies were sent by the candidates to us. First, Mr. Tyler August, Republican Walworth, is a lifelong resident of Walworth County and currently serves as the Majority Leader of the Wisconsin State Assembly. First elected in 2010, he represents the 31st Assembly District, which includes communities such as Elkhorn, Delavan, Darien, Williams Bay, Fontana on Geneva Lake, Sharon, and Clinton. A seventh-generation Walworth County resident, August grew up in the area and graduated from Bigfoot High School in Walworth in 2001. Before running for office, he served as Chief of Staff to former State Representative Tom Lothian, gaining firsthand experience working with local governments, businesses, and constituents across southeastern Wisconsin. In the Assembly, August has held several leadership roles, including Speaker Pro Tem from 2012 to 2023, before being elected Majority Leader by his Republican colleagues. In that role, he helps guide the Assembly's legislative agenda and works with members to move legislation through the chamber. Representative August lives in Walworth and remains active in the local community he grew up in. His district covers much of central and southern Walworth County and part of southeast Rock County, and includes key local hubs like Delavan and Elkhorn, along with the tourism and lake communities around Geneva Lake. I realize I'm reading really fast, but we want to get to the meat of this tonight. Dr. John Perryman was born and raised in southeast Michigan. After earning his bachelor and medical doctorate degrees from the University of Michigan, he moved to Chicago for postgraduate training in pediatrics. He has been working as a primary care pediatrician since 1993. He has also completed multiple graduate-level business courses. Over the course of his career, Dr. Perryman held several leadership posts, including the department chair positions and chairing a committee in charge of hiring physicians. In addition to his clinical work over the years, Dr. Perryman has assisted law enforcement on multiple abuse cases. Dr. Perryman's political involvement began in 2017, helping with various campaigns and efforts to get out the vote. Additionally, he advocated on behalf of a doctors group for universal health care coverage, speaking to multiple groups and organizations in both Wisconsin and Illinois. Dr. Perryman is married to Linda, his wife of 34 years. They have 2 children, Sean and Katie. This is Dr. Perryman's first run for political office. I'll now introduce the Ingalls-Koeppen American Legion Post 102 was chartered in 1919 and has continuously served the Walworth area for 107 years. With us tonight is Commander of Post 102, Peter Kale, and I had a lot more to say about him, but he said no. Peter will now explain the format which we will follow tonight.
Thank you, Nathan. In this District 31 candidate forum, Republican incumbent State Representative Tyler August and Democratic challenger Dr. John Perryman will share their views on various issues. The goal of this candidate forum is to allow the public to hear the candidates' views on the different topics. This is not a debate, and this is not a campaign rally. It is a forum to inform the public. It is increasingly difficult to meet office holders and candidates in a neutral site. We hope our 2 veterans organizations can do this. To be clear, the VFW and the American Legion are political organizations that lobby both at a state and federal level. The VFW and the Legion are nonpartisan organizations that endorse neither Republican or Democratic candidates. Our format. We have sent each candidate questions that are relevant to District 31. We will start with 3 votes from the last Assembly session Representative August voted for, and then 3 votes that Mr. Perryman would like to discuss. We will then ask questions about legislation concerning veterans issues, and we'll follow up with questions on public education, challenges in our villages, law enforcement, housing. We ask leaders of our villages, public education and law enforcement, businesses to send us questions they would like asked of the candidates. We have sent all the questions to the candidates previously so they can better prepare to answer on each particular issue. Our candidates' rules: each candidate will be given the same question. They will have 2 minutes to answer the question on that topic. Please stay on topic of that question. With 15 seconds left, our timer will say 15 seconds and time will be called to 2 minutes. We will alternate who answers each question. Please be respectful of each other and each other's opinions. Our rules for our public. Again, this is a forum to hear candidates' views. Please be respectful listeners. Do not cheer, boo, or make inappropriate remarks. If you do not follow this rule, you will be asked to leave. Our forum will end at 8:30. It is not our intention to have a candidate meet and greet. Audience members and candidates will be asked to leave the auditorium at 8:30, and room adjacent to this, you can talk with candidates if you have further questions. And thank you all. It's nice to have such a nice turnout. Thank you all for attending this forum. Yes, I am up. Our first question is on property taxes. And Representative August has sent in 3 questions and wants to discuss 3 issues. We'll go through his 3 issues, first letting Representative August 2 minutes to answer, and then Dr. Perriman. Our first one is on property taxes. Governor Evers, through his veto pen, increased property taxes for the next 400 years by roughly $57 billion over the next 20 years. The legislature passed a bill that would have reversed this veto. The bill was passed on a partisan vote and then vetoed by the governor. Representative August.
Thanks, Peter, and thank you everyone for coming out tonight. And thanks, John. We agreed we could, John and Tyler, right, to keep things going here. So in the previous budget, we included an increase for schools, which we also funded mostly through the state budget, putting money into the school funding formula to cover most of that. The governor decided to veto that, the years out of that, and make that increase permanent for the next 400 years without including the state funding for it. What that means is, with no legislative action and no legislative changes, property taxes will continue to increase every single year for the next 400 years. I think that's wrong. I think that every legislature, whether it's controlled by Republicans or Democrats, whether the governor is a Republican or a Democrat, should make those decisions on a budget-by-budget basis and determine if they have the state funds available. We passed a bill that would reverse that 400-year veto, which was, as mentioned, passed on a party line vote, unfortunately, and unfortunately was vetoed by the governor. I think that 400-year veto needs to be undone, and I also support the legislation, the constitutional amendment that we put on the ballot that will be in front of all of you. I supported putting it on the ballot. I will support it as a private citizen in the voting booth when I vote to make it so that no governor, regardless of party, can ever make that sort of a veto and undo the will of the people through their legislature again.
Dr. Perriman.
First, I want to say thank you to the VFW, the American Legion, to all of you for coming. This is really a tremendous event, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity to talk on these important issues. Let me unpack a little bit what the 400-year veto, or as it's called that, what that really is. It has to do with school funding. And with school funding, we have what are called revenue limits. And the revenue limits basically are an amount of money that comes from state general aid and property taxes. And it's a limit put on by the state government for school districts. Now, that limit has not kept pace with inflation for the last 15 years. So basically, we are at a deficit of over $3,000 per student because we have not kept up with inflation. Now, what the veto did was allow that revenue limit to increase by $325 a year. Now, it doesn't mean that it has to be used, but it almost certainly is going to be used because there was no general aid increase in the state budget. And schools have been starved for the last 15 years between the lack of increase related to inflation and also with money being shunted to private schools and to religious schools. So even this $325 increase will not keep up with inflation. It is just an attempt to try and undo years of underfunding of our public schools. That's what this was. So I would not have voted to override this veto. I think it's a step, but it's a small step in terms of correcting what we need to do to fix the funding for our public schools.
Thank you, Doctor. Our next issue, women's sports. Representative August has voted numerous times to protect the sanctity of women's sports. Following the lead of the federal government and the International Olympic Committee, the legislature voted to restrict men from competing in women's sports at the K-12 and collegiate levels. These bills were vetoed by the governor. Representative August.
Yeah, thank you. That's a vote that I'm actually really proud of. And if when I got started in this job, if somebody would have asked me if I would ever have to take a vote to protect girls and collegiate women in their sports, I would have never believed that we would end up here. But unfortunately, we are in a situation where now across the country and here in Wisconsin, policy decisions have been made by some local school boards to allow boys to compete against girls in their high school athletics. And I just think that that's wrong. This goes back quite a few years, but I did used to coach the Bigfoot girls club basketball team. And the thought of back when I coached them that those girls would have to play against boys who are just biologically different. They're just generally bigger and stronger. It doesn't mean they're better. They're just different. Is just not right. And I think that women athletes have made way too much of a stride forward to be recognized as athletes, to have their opportunity to be athletes. And the fact that that is being taken away from some athletes by allowing boys and men to compete against girls and women, I just think is wrong, and I think the problem needs to be fixed.
Dr. Perriman.
All right. So, no, I do not believe that women should compete in men's sports. I agree with that. The thing that I am curious about, though, is that there are two things. One is that this was already a policy put in place by the Wisconsin Interscholastic Athletic Association. It was already there. Second is that in a 15-year legislative career that Mr. August has been in the legislature, he had the opportunity to discuss 3 votes, any 3 he wanted, and he brought this one up. So I thought, am I missing something? Is this a bigger problem than I realized? So I tried to find data, look at how many transgender high school athletes are there, and it's a very difficult number to find, but from what I could gather, there's just not a big problem with it. So I looked at college athletics, and out of 500,000 college athletes, there are 10 transgender students. All right? Now, it's not that it's not an important issue, it's not that it doesn't have to be realized, but of all the things we have to deal with high cost, with environmental risk, with data centers, all the big topics that we have to deal with, I just was surprised that this was a selection. So I agree, women should not be involved in men's sports, but I just was surprised that this was one of the 3 selections.
Thank you, Dr. Perriman. Repeal of Act 10. During August's first session in the Assembly, Act 10 was signed into law, giving local governments and school boards control over their finances and reforming our education system. Attempts have been made by the governor and our court system to reverse Act 10, which would lead to a property tax jump of over $2 billion a year. Representative August.
Yeah, thank you. This is another important issue that I think and I fear hasn't gotten enough attention since it was first passed. Pretty much every legislative session that I've been around, Democrats on the other side of the legislators on the other side of the aisle, the Democrats, have proposed and tried to repeal Act 10. I think that's a mistake. I voted for Act 10. I think it was the right decision. I know it was the right decision because it empowered local school boards, local village boards, local city councils to make the decisions about what type of compensation was appropriate for their school, for their village, for their city, for their county. And I think that's where the decision making needs to stay. And it's been estimated that since then we've saved taxpayers over $20 billion with just that one piece of legislation. And I think that that's an important piece of legislation to keep in place. I think that if it's repealed, we will see massive property tax increases or massive cuts to local government services and school services as well. I think it's an important piece of how we govern here in Wisconsin, and it should stay in place.
All right. I would absolutely vote to repeal Act 10. Act 10, at its core, is a union-busting measure. It broke unions. It caused a decline in union membership in Wisconsin that was much steeper than across the country. Now, at the time it was implemented, Wisconsin was facing a budget deficit. That is true. But it went beyond just fixing that, and it went beyond just giving local governments control. It broke unions. And it was following the Republican tradition that really started with Reagan and the air traffic controllers and has continued on. And I believe that it was an effort by Scott Walker to show his conservative bona fides as he wanted to run for president. I grew up in a union household. My dad was a UAW member. I understand the power that unions have to give working people a shot. And basically what's happened now with teachers, without that collective bargaining, they can only negotiate wages up to the rate of inflation. They cannot negotiate working conditions. They cannot negotiate benefits. They cannot negotiate class size. They do not have that option, which is why so many teachers leave Wisconsin. And that is why we have seen a decline in terms of our educational performance. So yes, we have saved tax dollars, but you have to understand there's always a trade-off. And to me, this trade-off with the decline of our public schools is not worth it, and the breaking of unions is not worth it. So I would absolutely vote to repeal Act 10.
Nope. We're not going to clap. We're not going to boo. We're not going to do that. This is a forum. Dr. Perriman has 3 issues that he would like to bring before our forum. For these 3 issues, Dr. Perriman will discuss first, and then Representative August. First, Dr. Perriman's, I would have voted against the most recent budget. Dr. Perriman.
Thank you. So in the most recent state budget, I would have voted against it because of cuts to veterans programs that took place. Specifically, there were 2 veterans programs that came under fire. One was the Veterans Housing Relief Program, the other Veterans Outreach Recovery Program. Now, that first program for housing kept open homeless shelters for veterans who were homeless and would provide them support until they could get back on their feet. The Legislative Fiscal Bureau told the legislature we needed $1.9 million, $1.9 million out of a $2 billion surplus. That money was pulled out by the Republicans in the legislature, leading to the closure of 2 facilities, one in Chippewa Falls, one in Green Bay, and cutting the number of beds from 100 to 40 for homeless veterans. I think that's wrong. The other was the cut for Veterans Outreach Recovery Program, which is a program that, with COVID funding, was able to expand. There were able to be more offices, more staff, and they were able to provide thousands of more services to veterans. Tony Evers tried to keep the COVID level funding permanent and make it a part of the state budget. The Republicans said no, and that went back to pre-COVID funding, leading to the loss of those positions. And one of the new employees at one of the offices, himself a veteran, said, and I think this is so telling, why do we have to fight to get our services at home when we served in the military? And I think that's exactly right. This was about $900,000. So all told, about $3 million for these 2 critical programs the Republicans did not feel was worth it. I think that's wrong. I would have voted against the budget.
Representative August?
Sure. Well, so the last state budget was negotiated on a bipartisan basis between the Republican legislature and the Democrat governor. So to say that we would vote against the budget for a couple of reasons, I think is misguided. There's always things that are missing from a budget. There's always things that we wish were in a budget. We have to get to 50 yeses in the state assembly. You have to get to 17 yeses in the state senate, and you have to get to 1 yes in the East Wing, the governor, regardless of what's in there. And so it's very hard work, and it's easy to cherry pick 1 or 2 items, but we can do that on the positive side as well. That a no vote on the budget would have been a no vote on $550 million in special education funding, $300 million more for local roads, a middle-class tax cut, and reducing the tax on retirement income here in the state of Wisconsin for everyone. So I think the budget had a lot of good things in it. It can always be improved. It's never a perfect document. It's $112 billion. Personally, I think that it spends too much. But not everybody gets what they want out of a budget document. I certainly didn't, and I don't think that any legislator that voted for it or any legislator that voted against it would say that it had every single thing that they wanted. It's just not true. But that's the art of compromise. So I voted for the budget. I think it was a good document. Overall, I think it's great for taxpayers. And for all those reasons I mentioned, including an extra $70 million in mental health care, I think that it was the right thing to do, and that's why I voted for it.
Thank you, Representative August. Our second issue from Dr. Perriman, I would have voted for Medicaid expansion. Dr. Perriman.
So when the Affordable Care Act was passed under the Obama administration, there was a provision in it that allowed states to increase Medicaid coverage to people who were making up to 138% of the poverty level. The numbers of people who would be affected would vary from one state to another, but the federal government was going to fund 100% of that initially, and then subsequently has funded 90% of that expansion. Now, initially it was mostly taken up by Democratic states, but subsequently more and more Republican states took it up as well, leaving 10 states who haven't. Wisconsin and most of the Confederacy. That's what's left. Now, the arguments that have been made in terms of not expanding Medicaid, one was that there was a concern about those funds being taken away by the federal government. And at the beginning, I could see where that might be the case, where there might be concern about that. But this act has been in place for several years now. That funding has still been there. There was a concern that putting people on Medicaid would be a disincentive to work. And I think that's a fundamental misunderstanding of Medicaid population. I have many Medicaid families in my practice. The vast majority of them work. Many work multiple jobs. It's just the jobs they have, they can't get the type of insurance that some of us can get in other positions. So they are just trying to get by and get what they can. Now, Tyler has made the argument as well that it's better to have people on private insurance than on Medicaid. Now, with private insurance, especially with something that you could afford, if you've got a family of four and you're at $40,000, which is what that poverty, that 138% of poverty is, you're going to probably buy a cheap plan, a bronze plan or a silver plan, with a low premium. But the problem is that your deductibles and your out-of-pocket costs are high. So what you do is you end up shunting those types of costs onto people who can't afford it. They will go bankrupt, and that happens over and over again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and this is a topic that's tough to get in 2 minutes, John.
Yeah,
I definitely agree with you. There's a lot more to it than that. But I don't support the expansion of Medicaid, as John said. I mean, currently in Wisconsin, if you're 100% and under, you are covered by Badger Care Plus. Everyone else can go into the Obamacare exchanges. Other states that have expanded, that have done Medicaid expansion, have seen their costs of that program double over their initial projections when they did it. Also, Medicaid reimbursement rates are about 2/3 of the actual cost of delivering the service. So every Medicaid patient that goes in to see a provider, 1/3 of their cost is already being subsidized by either the provider or by private insurance. And that's not a sustainable model either. It's also medical assistance. The whole MA budget is also our biggest, generally our biggest cost to continue item that we have budget to budget. So when new budget revenue projections come in every budget, when they say, okay, we have a couple $2 billion in brand new money, the cost to continue on medical assistance currently eats up almost all of that. So that includes without expanding it. So if we keep adding people into the pool, we'll have less and less dollars when we talk about funding K-12 education, the UW system, roads, things that are priorities as well. So I think that it would be long-term, it's a bad budget decision to expand Medicaid, and I don't think we should do it, especially because the Obamacare exchanges are there and available, and they were designed to take care of people over 100% of the federal poverty level, and that's where people should be directed.
Thank you. Our last issue from Dr. Perriman. I would have voted to fund the MIA recovery program. This was never even brought to a vote, something Mr. August would have control over as a majority leader. Dr. Perriman.
So what this refers to is something called the MIA Recovery and Identification Project that's done through the University of Wisconsin. So this is a group of volunteers from multiple different specialties, biotechnology, genetics, anthropology, biology, and other specialties. And what they do as volunteers is they go overseas to find the remains of American veterans and bring them home and identify them. A very worthy goal. Now, this program through the University of Wisconsin has become a model for other programs around the country. And what has happened is that they requested funding from the state in the amount of about $500,000. Now, that was turned down in a legislative vote a session ago, I believe, and this last time wasn't even brought forward. Now, again, a $2 billion surplus. $500,000 to bring those people home that we should bring home. That should be our commitment. So I think this program should have been brought forward and should have been passed.
I agree that it's a great program, John. There's no doubt about that. And as you said, there's other states doing this work as well. I think it's a great program. I will say that the legislative process, if there's not a bill in the majority leader's office, it's still in committee, I can't schedule it for a vote. In this past session, it was never even brought forward out of committee. So that's number one. Number two, there's been confusion about the actual costs, the actual request. Those numbers have gone back and forth between the UW and the governor. And lastly, I would say that the UW system, their total budget is $8 billion. $8 billion for the UW system. So this is a great program, and the UW system has resources. Now, if we need to pass a bill that says that you're going to direct some of your current resources into this program, then that's absolutely what we should do. But to say that out of $8 billion, the University of Wisconsin can't find that amount of money to fund a very needed program, I just don't buy that.
Go ahead, Nate.
Oh, that's right, Ron.
I get to go back up. Well, I get to ask the first question, and it covers a very hot topic. If elected, John, you'll go first.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
If elected, would you or would you not support Wisconsin law enforcement at both the state and local level to work with immigration and customs enforcement, that's ICE, and border control to help enforce current laws considering illegal immigration?
No, and I will explain why. It is not the job of local police to enforce immigration laws. That is not what they're there for. They're there to protect us, to keep our communities safe. The federal government and ICE has an incredibly huge budget. They do not need our local law enforcement doing their work for them. The only time I would say that it should be done, and it has been done in some sanctuary locations, is that if you have a convicted felon of a violent crime, yes, you report them to ICE for deportation. But for routine things, for inquiring about immigration status, for inquiring on a traffic stop, if you're legal or not, no. Local police should not be doing that. They have enough to do on their own. The other issue is that you have to look at it from a standpoint of public safety. And does having that in place, having local law enforcement enforce immigration, does that make you safer as a community? And I've tried to find data that shows that either these types of programs make communities less safe or more safe. And what happens is that when you have local law enforcement enforcing immigration law, there's a loss of trust. There's a fear. There's a fear of going to the police. So if you have an undocumented person who witnesses a crime, who could provide evidence to convict someone, they're afraid to come forward because they're afraid they will be deported. Now, I don't think that's right. I think that it's the job of the local police to protect their community. They need trust to be able to do that. So no, it is not their job to enforce immigration law.
I would support them. I would support local law enforcement working with our ICE officers in Wisconsin and across the country, frankly. I want to be clear that I support legal immigration. I think it's helped I know it's what helped build this country, and legal immigration is an important part of what we do. This session, I actually was proud of both chambers, both parties. We passed legislation to allow DACA recipients who have legal status with the federal government and are checked regularly by the federal government. They have to check in. They're probably the most vetted individuals in our country, but they weren't allowed to be able to do certain things like get a barber's license or an interior decorator's license. Well, we fixed that problem. They're now able to do that, and I think that's an important part. But illegal immigration does need to be dealt with. And when someone has broken the law, they've come here illegally, and they have an interaction with law enforcement, I do think that it's law enforcement's responsibility to report if they are here illegally and assist ICE, because illegal immigration is a major problem in our country that still needs to be fixed.
Thank you, gentlemen. I have some questions concerning veterans. One was for the Missing in Action Recovery and Identification Project. I believe you've already answered that question rather thoroughly. Dr. Perryman, I'll ask you the question first, and then Representative August. Wisconsin operates 3 nursing home facilities for veterans and their spouses. Finding qualified professionals to staff these facilities continues to be a major issue. The cost of private placement is often beyond the financial ability of veterans. What can Wisconsin do to improve the staffing of veterans' homes and/or help with the cost of care at private facilities?
So this is a huge question. As the demographics of this country change, as we get older, we are having to deal with more and more people who will need help as they become seniors. And the staffing for that has become a bigger and bigger problem. And if you've ever worked in a nursing home or if you ever have been there, you can understand why, because it is a tough job. It is difficult. So what we need to do, in terms of the staffing part, we have to align a couple of things. We need to incentivize people to go into this in terms of helping with their education, doing something where they will stay in those positions in terms of some type of tuition reimbursement, but we need to incentivize people to go into that type of work. In terms of the funding for those homes, we will have to look at what happens in terms of Medicaid funding from the federal government and what we can do as a state. But the staffing part, we really need to take a comprehensive look at getting people into these jobs, and we have to pay them. You know, it's that simple. I mean, this is hard work. And, you know, someone is not going to go in there and work for $12 an hour. And they shouldn't, because they're going to be taking care of our grandparents, our parents. We need these people to want to be there and to want to help us. So that would be my approach.
Yeah, and I would add to that we also want it to be a high quality of life in those facilities, and I'm sure we agree on that, John, right? I mean, the state has the 3 veterans homes, and we need to continue to make sure we have competitive wages in those homes to make sure they can attract the most competitive, the best. We want the best taking care of our veterans. That's part of why we invested an extra $5 million into those 3 homes in the last state budget. There are also those homes, the last time I was told, talking to our Veterans Committee chairman in the Assembly, those homes are not at capacity yet, so we do have space there, which is a good thing. And we also did pass a bill to address some of the issues along the nonprofit sector that do house some of these veterans. And some of the reasons why some of those places are low on funding, not the state, the homes, but the other ones, are because they have a lot of empty beds, and they get paid on a per bed basis. And so a lot of the work that's been done in this space is done in conjunction with the Department of Veterans Affairs in Madison, that tells us what they need in those homes and why. And that's where a lot of these things have come from. So I think we need to continue to incentivize good pay to keep the best people there. And again, that's why we included over about $5 million to go extra to go into those 3 homes that the state operates to make sure that they are at the very best.
Thank you, gentlemen. This question will be first for Representative August and then Dr. Perryman. Currently, many unaccredited for-profit entities are charging veterans excessive fees for help filing claims for their VA benefits. Other states, such as Florida, have passed legislation to curtail this practice. What can be done in Wisconsin to protect military veterans and their loved ones from these quote-unquote claims sharks? Representative August. Yeah,
I think claim shark is the best way to phrase that. First of all, when someone contacts my office in Madison because they're looking for veterans resources, they're a veteran, they're wondering what's out there that they qualify for because of their service, the very first thing we do is refer them to their county veterans service officer. That's the most direct person in their community that can connect them with all of those services, and they don't pay a fee to that individual. We as taxpayers pay for that service for our veterans, which is of course appropriate, and we should continue to do that. We need to make sure that if someone is going to use one of those claim sharks, if they're going to be allowed to operate in Wisconsin, that there's significant regulation around them, around what they're able to receive in compensation. What we don't want to see is, you see this sometimes in the structured settlement industry, where someone will have a set of benefits coming to them and they will sign the entire benefit package over and then just get a little bit of it here and there and I just think that that's wrong, and it's certainly wrong to do to our veterans. especially veterans as they start to qualify these programs are a lot of times getting older and may not have the family or friend support system to help them navigate that. So the more we push these folks and direct them to their county veteran service officer, the better off the veteran is going to be.
I agree this is a despicable practice by the claim sharks. And let me go into that a little bit. The VA accredits certain firms and companies with helping veterans for a fee to navigate their services. What's happening is that there are unaccredited firms that are doing this practice and charging money and sometimes taking so much in fees that the veterans are just getting robbed. Now, there used to be a criminal penalty at the federal level for this, but that was taken away about 20 years ago. So essentially what happens is that the VA sends a cease and desist letter. That's what happens for these companies that are doing that. Now, some states have started to implement criminal penalties to these companies that do this, where they charge a fee and they're not accredited with the VA. I think we should do that. I think we need to criminally prosecute these firms that are doing this, that are taking advantage of veterans in a vulnerable position. That would be my stance.
Thank you, gentlemen. I've been asked, and I'm surprised we didn't do it earlier. Thanks for reminding me, Ron. You see a lot of gentlemen and ladies in the front row here and back there. These are members of our VFW post and American Legion post. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here this evening. And if you are a veteran or know a veteran in need, please make sure you contact Ron or Peter or myself or our County Veteran Service Office. Thank you for mentioning County Veteran Service Officers. I was one for 11 years here in Walworth, and it was an honor to serve in that position for our veterans. So please make sure you contact John Schultz if you or a veteran you know needs assistance. One last question. It's actually bleeding into our next category of questions, but I get to ask it. It's not a veteran question. Then after that, Peter's going to come up. So Representative August, what are your views on the construction of data centers and their corresponding energy sources here in Wisconsin?
Yeah, that is not a small topic, that's for sure. First of all, I think that what we've seen as these data centers have started to come into Wisconsin, and we didn't realize it was happening until it was happening, was that some of the data centers were requiring local municipalities that were interested in negotiating and bringing a data center into their community to sign an NDA. I don't think that that's right. I think that if a community is going to go down the path of trying to bring a data center into their community, that the community should actually know about it. I believe it's Representative Moses in the Northwest has introduced a bill on that. I'm supportive of that bill, and I think that we should pass that. We did pass a bill in the state assembly that would have, unfortunately, the state senate did not send it to the governor, but it would have required data centers to pay 100% of their own energy and infrastructure costs so that they weren't passing it on to residential ratepayers or even other commercial ratepayers, which I think is important. It would require them to use what's called a closed loop water cooling system so that they wouldn't continually be taking water out of either the well system if they're in that type of a municipality or out of the groundwater, the aquifers, and draining that resource. And any green energy that they were going to use, it would have required them to produce that energy on their own site so that we wouldn't continue to lose farmland to some of these projects like we have just up the road in the town of Darien that's dealing with that and has been for quite a few years now. It's unfortunate the state senate didn't bring that bill up. I think that we need to bring that bill back, and I would definitely support that bill again.
Okay. I agree with Tyler about the non-disclosures. I believe that in the interest of something this big, something that's going to have this much of an impact on the community, it really needs to be transparent to the community. I am disappointed that the state government has not been able to come up with some other legislation regarding this And I understand there have been efforts made towards that end, but it's disappointing that it hasn't happened. The only thing that has been done is that there was a sales tax break that was provided for these companies that ended up costing about $2 billion in sales tax that we could have had. Now, in the long run, that might be a good investment. We may end up getting more money, and I think we probably will if we have enough centers built here. But, that's the only thing that's happened at the statewide level so far. So I think that the state government has a responsibility to set a minimum number of standards. Some of the things that you mentioned, Tyler. Things about what's going to be the energy use and energy source, what's going to be the impact on groundwater supplies, what's going to be the impact environmentally in terms of pollution if you're using non-renewable energy, if you're using diesel generators and things of that nature. And it needs to be made crystal clear to the community that's thinking about this, how it's going to impact them, and then you leave it up to them. Maybe they want it, maybe they don't, but it should be their decision as a final decision because they're going to be impacted by it. But I just am disappointed that nothing has come out of the state government yet to deal with this really huge, huge issue.
We have asked local law enforcement, schools, village leaders, businesses to bring their concerns to this forum. Here is our first concern, and Dr. Perriman, you can answer this first. Law enforcement, schools, and village leaders have concerns in regard to state levy limits. A complex formula provides, at best, a 2% increase in local tax levy allocation. How can the state legislature help increase funding without multiple referendums that are currently required and restrictive? Dr. Perriman.
So the levy limit, what that does, it's basically an imposition by the state government that restricts what local governments can do. The short answer is I would say that they are gone past their useful point. They need to be gotten rid of. I think that local governments need to have the flexibility to do what they need to do. I think that it's not the state's job to say, yes, you can do this, no, you can do that. The local control that the Republican Party frequently talks about is taken away in this situation. Local governments should have that ability. Maybe they'll do it, maybe they don't, but it's not the state's decision. It should be the locality's decision. So the levy limits, in my mind, have outlived their usefulness in terms of restricting property taxes. I would say they should be gotten rid of.
I support keeping levy limits in place, and here's why. But as I'm out and about, especially now after the massive property tax increases that people saw last December, it's usually, if it's not the number one issue that people ask me about, it's number two. People are struggling to be able to pay these property taxes, and I think keeping a limit on how fast they can go up is the responsible thing to do for the taxpayer. I would also note that as new development happens in those municipalities, that revenue can be realized outside of that limit. So new construction, the communities can receive the benefits of the property taxes from the new developments. I think ultimately the one thing that I'll just slightly disagree with is that the local control argument, because there is still the ability for local taxpayers to approve going outside of those limits. They just have to be asked in a referendum. And if they decide that the services are needed, then they can say yes to their local government, will pay for those services. If they don't want to pay for those services or they feel that they're not needed, then they'll say, no, we're not going to pay for those services. And so it's ultimately up to each individual voter in these municipalities if they want to exceed those limits or not.
Thank you. We have a school open enrollment question. Representative August, you'll be first to discuss it. Open enrollment has a direct impact on school district budgets. Districts must maintain their own schools and fund students attending in other school districts. What can be done to assist school districts impacted by open enrollment? Representative August.
Sure. So I think the first thing is that I've always supported parents making the decision of where their child goes to school, whether that's public school, charter school, choice school, home school, parochial school. I think it's ultimately up to the parents to make that decision for their children. I think that something that's important to keep in mind when we talk about this is when a parents open enroll that child out of one public school and into another, the public school that they're leaving does get to keep a portion of the state funding for that child. Understanding that buildings like this still have to be heated, whether there's 20 students in this room or 30. So they do get to retain some of those dollars. I think school funding is a huge issue that I continue to work on. A lot of folks talk about pumping money into the school funding formula. That doesn't help all of the school districts in our county here and in our district. That's why I've been a huge proponent of trying to put a per pupil floor into the funding formula, so a first draw. So the first $1,000 for every student comes out regardless of how the formula operates, which would be a huge benefit to our area. I actually got that into a budget a couple of budgets ago, convinced my colleagues that even though it doesn't really benefit their districts as much, that we could use the help because of our high property values down here. Unfortunately, the governor chose to veto that out, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to stop trying to do that. So I think that we also did include $900 million in the last budget for K-12 education. Again, over $500 million of that in special education, which is on a per pupil. So that money does find its way here.
So with the issue with enrollment, you have a direct tie between the number of students within a district and the revenue they get. Now, even though some of that revenue may stay when the student leaves, a lot of it does leave. However, the costs for that district don't go down. And as this happens over and over again, you get into a situation where schools with less revenue are able to offer less services. They have to have larger class sizes, and you get into a very difficult negative spiral. So there's two options, really. One would be whether should you even have open enrollment. And I think open enrollment is a popular thing with many families. So I don't think that's a viable solution. However, I think that we need to disconnect funding specifically from enrollment levels. I think we have to have a better way to give schools what they need based on their actual needs rather than their student numbers. So that formula needs to be revised. The thing that I would disagree with Tyler on in terms of, I'm all for parents choosing where their kids go to school, but I don't think taxpayer funds should go to private charter or religious schools. They should stay within the public school system. That is our responsibility as written in the state constitution, and I would pursue that as well as I could. Yep.
Our next question will be about housing, and Dr. Perriman will answer first. There is a critical shortage of workforce housing throughout District 31 and the rest of Wisconsin. This makes it increasingly difficult on Wisconsin families to live in the same communities in which they work. What should the state of Wisconsin do to meet this challenge? Dr. Perriman.
So with housing, there are a number of challenges with this, and it is a problem. Basically, over the last 4 years, to be able to be a homeowner in multiple communities, when you look at what salary it takes to be a homeowner, it's increased drastically in the last 4 years. Even in some of the less expensive communities in the state, if you're not making 70 grand a year, you're not going to be able to own a home. It's just not going to happen. So there's a couple of things we have to look at. At the local level, a lot of it has to do with zoning. And the zoning restrictions in terms of lot size, in terms of multi-family dwellings, things of that nature, are things that are going to impact the ability to build more affordable housing. Now, what can the state do in terms of that? Perhaps you find some ways to incentivize the construction of these types of homes, but again, that's something we would have to work with local governments on. The other thing that could help with that is that one of the biggest costs for new homes and for new developments is infrastructure cost. So putting in the sewer lines and the electric and everything else, that's a big upfront cost that developers have to deal with. Now, perhaps there could be a way to help finance that ahead of time to make it easier to build these developments. And this is not a new issue for the United States. I mean, after World War II, when you had so many veterans coming home, there was a project in New York called Levittown. I don't know how many of you have heard of that, but basically what it did, we needed to build a lot of homes quickly. And what they did is they figured out a way to almost like assembly line build homes where they could build a home a day. And they were somewhat, kind of the same, they weren't going to be anything elaborately different, but they were housing that people could afford. So there are ways to do this, There are ways we can do this, but, we have to be imaginative in terms of financing for infrastructure and in terms of how we actually build these homes.
Yeah, I agree with much of what John had to say there. I mean, it's part of why in the last couple of budgets we've done a housing revolving loan fund for developers to try and make it more cost effective for them to create homes that the average worker, teacher, firefighter, nurse can actually purchase in our communities. The other thing we need is more buy-in from local communities. I think something that the City of Whitewater is doing is very interesting with how they have partnered with developers to create starter homes. If you talk to realtors in the area, there are a lot of homes in our area that are the $500,000 and up. You can find those homes. It's those $300,000 homes that are just tough to find, if not impossible. The $200,000 homes that are tough to find, if not impossible. And that's a problem. And so when you look at what Whitewater's done with their project, they've tried to lower the cost of actually building the homes in the first place to make them more affordable for people to actually purchase. I think that we need to continue to talk to our local governments. Sometimes the impact fees that they charge developers for some of these projects make it not cost effective to make it to allow it to be workforce housing. It's second homes or it's large lot sizes, not workforce housing, which we so desperately need around here. And so we've also done some things at the state level to make those rezones into residential easier for local municipalities, but they have to want to be able to, they have to want to do it. And that's been one of the bigger challenges that we've seen across the state, is that municipalities are looking for the bigger lot sizes because they can charge larger impact fees, larger lots, and they just don't want to build this type of housing, but we need it.
Thank you. Our next question has to do with mental health services. Representative August will go first. Schools, law enforcement, and communities are all affected by mental health issues and the lack of local services. Recently, facilities to admit persons placed under a protective custody were closed with no alternative locations in place. Our police departments typically now take between 8 to 20 hours on an emergency detention. This requires 2 officers to transport to northern counties. How can legislature improve access to mental health care in District 31? Representative August.
Yeah, this is a huge issue that I hear from law enforcement about all the time, because they not only have to send 2 officers to escort the individual to the facility, they a lot of times have to call in mutual aid from a neighboring police department or from the county sheriff's department to cover their municipality, because they may only have 2 officers at a time on duty. I think all of this in the mental health space, the biggest challenge we have is the lack of providers. Whether you're talking veterans services or school counselors, there's a huge deficit in mental health professionals in our state. It's why we've increased in the last budget. We added another $30 million in for school mental health specifically to try and address some of these mental health issues that our students have before they manifest into even bigger problems when they're adults. But we need to continue to look at ways where we can keep some of the folks who need these emergency detentions more local. We need to find ways where we can continue to keep our law enforcement dealing with law enforcement and have access to there's a hotline where we can call and actually have folks talk to a mental health professional versus a 911 dispatcher or versus their local police officer who's just not trained in those things. And we've added additional funding to that as well. So there's no single way to deal with this problem. It's a problem across all levels, as I mentioned, and we need to continue to address it and through the state budget.
I agree with Tyler on many of these points. It is a big stress on law enforcement. I've had similar conversations in terms of talking with our sheriff's department, our local police. This is a problem. And I've dealt with this in my practice. You know, I've been in practice since the 90s, and I have to take care of mental health problems that I never would have dreamed of having to take care of back when I started in practice. And it's because we have a shortage of mental health providers. We have a shortage of psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, therapists. So there is a real issue with staffing. So we have to look at it from the standpoint on the medical side of starting to get people to go into those residency programs. And actually the numbers have started to improve a little bit the last few years, as well as finding ways to get people to get into counseling, social work, or to be a psychologist. The issue in terms of inpatient housing, we have to look back a little bit. And back 50, 60, 70 years ago, there were a lot of inpatient facilities, but there was a movement away from those because of problems that were identified. You had a lot of abusive situations, you had a lot of terrible care, you had a lot of really bad things happening in these facilities, and we had more treatment options in terms of medications. So there was a move towards more community care. And it was well-intentioned, but what's happened now is that we just don't have enough inpatient beds. I mean, if I have a kid who needs to be admitted, I have to send them to the ER. They're going to sit there for a day, 2 days, 3 days waiting for a bed. That's just not acceptable. So we're going to have to look at finding some way to either increase the number of inpatient beds through our current hospitals that are in the area, or potentially look at building a state hospital. But we need inpatient beds because of the patients who need it to get the care that they need, and also to relieve the stress on others in the community who are taking care of these patients.
August. Oh, we did. Got it. Sorry about that. Getting mixed up. Got it. Okay. Our next question is on social media, and Dr. Perriman will ask first. Several studies have shown that social media has severe negative impacts on children and youth and adults as well. Should Wisconsin have laws that would restrict access to social media for minors? Dr. Perriman.
So social media, again, in the medical space, this is a big issue. I mean, we talk about this a lot. And as you review the data on the impacts on social media, a lot of it is negative. It's not all negative, which is kind of surprising. I mean, there are some people who do benefit from social media. And I'm talking about kids and teens. So it's not uniformly negative, but a lot of it is negative. So when you look at social media exposure, there's a couple ways you have to think about it. Can you restrict access of a person using a device to different social media? And that is a little tricky. I mean, there have been ways to try and limit those exposures, but kids are smart. Kids find a way around these things. They find workarounds. So in terms of limiting the actual exposure, I think we do need to work with tech companies to find more rigorous ways to avoid potential exposure to a pedophile, a criminal, a pornographic site, things of that nature. But that's going to take some time. Some countries have started to implement this. Australia recently implemented a nationwide ban of this sort. It'll be interesting to see what their experience is. But many places have tried to do this. It's been hard to enforce. So the other thing we look at is maybe the amount of time. The amount of time that they're on their devices, and a place where we have access to that is in schools. So perhaps something we need to look at is limiting the ability to use phones in schools, at least during class time, potentially even between classes, to allow people to learn to socialize, to talk to each other. I mean, there have been studies that have looked at this, and when kids don't have access to their phones, they actually talk to each other, which is kind of a nice thing. So, I mean, I think that would be a way to reduce the potential exposure to some of these bad social media influences just because of the amount of time. It's not a perfect answer, but it's a way we could get to. And I think in terms of just academic performance, it would be a huge help.
Yeah, I would say that there is no perfect answer because it's technology and it's difficult to regulate. But we did attempt in the legislature to regulate the amount of time that students would be using their cell phones. We passed a bill that would have required every school district to come up with a policy of not allowing cell phone use during instructional period. I actually think it should be more of what I call bell to bell, beginning of the day to end of day, and get the cell phones out of the schools and let teachers do their jobs and teach the kids. We also established a study committee between the previous session and this last session to look at a lot of these issues because they are so complicated. Stakeholders from all over the state, all kinds of different industries, and we were able to pass a lot of those bills over to the state Senate. They dealt with things, unfortunately, again, the Senate didn't take those up, but it dealt with things like parental consent for certain apps being installed on mobile devices that would have required places like Apple and Google through their Play stores to get some sort of parental consent before these apps would even be allowed to be put on the phone. So at least the parents know that those apps are being utilized by their children. And things like requiring ID verification for adult material online. I think it's much too easy for students to get into some of this adult material. We passed that legislation as well. It didn't make it across the finish line. But those are the kinds of things that need to continue to be passed. Again, I am a big believer in the bell-to-bell cell phones in a locker, cell phones at home, cell phones in the car, just not in the school bell-to-bell.
Thank you. School governance, Representative August, you'll discuss first. What is your position on local versus state control of schools and how school boards govern? Which approach do you believe ultimately yields better outcomes for students and communities?
Sure, I think the answer is both. I think there's state involvement because it's in our state constitution that the state government is required to be involved in the K-12 education. And I think it's up to school boards and parents to make some of these decisions as well. So whether that's a general curriculum guide set by the state, literacy standards I think are super important. Right now in Wisconsin, we are down to less than a third of fourth graders are reading at proficient levels. I think that's something that isn't a political talking point. That's an actual problem that needs to be fixed. We need to get back to teaching phonics because not all schools are doing it that way. And a lot of times people used to try and compare Wisconsin education to say things like, well, at least we're not Mississippi, at least we're not Louisiana. But if you look at some of the changes that they've implemented there, they actually have surpassed us in literacy scores, and they do it with less money per student. So I'm not saying that we should cut school funding. What I'm saying is we should follow what other states have found to be successful and get students reading again. And I think that's a partnership between the state, setting aside some literacy funds, about $50 million that are now going through a literacy council to get people and tutors into the classrooms to continue to make sure that students learn to read at a young age and that they're proficient at their grade level, because if you can't learn to read, it's really hard to learn anything else. So I think that, yes, there needs to be some standards set by the state that these are the goals that districts need to get to. But it also, you know, the Williams Bay School District isn't the same as Beloit and isn't the same as Milwaukee, and we have different challenges, and Williams Bay isn't the same as Delavan. And so those school boards need to be able to make some of those decisions for themselves and what's best for their communities as well.
Okay. All right. So I agree it's a bit of a hybrid. I think the question about what is better, local control or state control, is honestly going to vary with the quality of the local school board, which is highly variable. You may have school boards that are just loaded with really smart, dedicated people, and they'll just give you great policy, great educational opportunities. You may have school boards with people who are just there because they're just trying to fill their time in retirement, you know, and don't know what to do. So the quality may be varied, but I think that the general approach that Tyler talked about, I think, is reasonable. You have a group of state guidelines that you give the local school board some flexibility, and I think that flexibility aspect needs to be looked at even a little bit more, because one of the things that led to the founding of charter schools was the idea of experimentation and trying different methods of teaching. And I was talking to a school superintendent, and I said, why do you have to have a charter school? Why can't you have a charter classroom, or maybe something within the school that would be something there that could try a different approach? And they said, you know, basically it had to do with certain state requirements. But I think that giving local boards a little more flexibility to experiment, to see what works. Obviously, the state would have to monitor and make sure that things are being done that need to be done. That would be, I think, an advantage. But yes, the state sets broad guidelines, local control for the finer points.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Our next question will be our last prepared question, and after that, our candidates will be available in the room adjacent to this. It is a question from our village leaders on maintaining qualified workers. Dr. Perriman, you're going to discuss this first. Schools, villages, and law enforcement have challenges hiring and keeping qualified teachers, police, and workers. How can state government help to ensure we can properly maintain a qualified workforce? Dr. Perriman.
So this will depend a bit on which specific jobs you're talking about. With teachers, a lot of it's going to have to do with revamping education funding. I think a fundamental difference that Tyler and I have is in terms of the approach to education funding. I don't think money should be going to private schools. I think that the funding needs to be detached from open enrollment. But this is a situation where oh, now I lost my train of thought, I'm sorry. The local governments, they're restricted by the levy limit. Now, the levy limits, we talked about a little bit before, restricts the growth of government and what government can tax. Now, there are some ways you can get around that, or certain spending that can be done, but they're really hamstrung, say, if you need to hire a new clerk because your clerk of 40 years is retired, or you need to hire a new police officer, or you need someone else. So the restrictions put on the municipalities by the state have hampered their ability to be able to hire qualified workers. So I think that's something where, again, that levy limit needs to be reexamined and potentially removed, so municipalities have the flexibility to do what they need to do.
Sure, yeah, and it's a complicated question. I agree. It depends what we're talking, municipal, county, law enforcement, teacher. There's a lot of different answers here. But overall, I would say that, first of all, again, in the last state budget, we invested $1.5 billion into shared revenue. We also were able to tie shared revenue increases to sales tax revenue. So now as the sales tax revenue in the state goes up, a dedicated stream of that sales tax revenue goes into the shared revenue formula. And that was, I think, an additional $83 million just from that change. I think it was $83 million in the last budget that was able to go into the shared revenue to our municipalities. I think we need to continue to improve the quality of life in Wisconsin, make it a place that people want to be. And I think we always need to remember that these municipal employees and school district employees are all taxpayers too. And so as we continue to keep our tax levels acceptable, that'll make sure that those folks are still wanting to be here for tax reasons as well. We've also been able to incentivize some consolidated services to try and get municipalities to work together. A great example of it here was Williams Bay and Fontana with their EMS situation, where they didn't have the volunteered or the paid on call people stepping up any longer, and so they decided to put their rescue squads together here and make sure that they still had coverage, and that's very innovative here at the local level, and I think we need to continue to encourage those types of consolidated services, not just in municipal government, but I think that there's ways to do it across county lines. We've seen counties do some of that. And I know that my time is going to be over here. So, John, I just want to thank you. This has been a really good discussion. And it's nice that in this political firestorm that we're in, that we're able to have a nice gentlemanly conversation. And I appreciate that, John. Thank you.
This concludes our 31st District Assembly Forum. Thank you, Representative August. Thank you, Dr. Perriman. VFW Commander Grabsty, thanks for organizing this. This was his idea, and
Thanks, John.
nice job. We hope to do this again. I want to thank State Commanders Bond and Lido for attending. Thank you. Thank you, Williams Bay School and Dr. White, for allowing us to be here tonight. Thank you to all the veterans. Thank you. Yeah. We hope this was an informative and helpful forum to better understand the critical issues of the 31st District, and helpful when you make your vote. Thank you, everyone. This concludes.
All right. Thank you, everybody. All right.